All right, guys, let's start with our next firewall, which is going to be Palo Alto. As I've already explained, Palo Alto is a zone-based firewall. So the topology for this is going to be slightly different as we have seen for Cisco ASA, which was an interface-based firewall. We configured security levels on the interfaces and no zones. Here in Palo Alto, it is slightly different. We are also going to configure it via CLI. Some of the management configuration will be done via CLI, and most of the remaining configurations we do via GUI, which is through the web GUI. And this is not limited to this particular topology only. The industry also follow the same thing. We do most of the things via GUI. So let's look at the topology, guys. This is going to be my inside zone here, and this is going to again be my test PC, which is acting as the management PC for the Palo Alto and also the test user for the inside zone of the Palo Alto. So the topology here includes all these devices. This connection is for internet connectivity in case this guy needs some update or some softwares to manage any of these firewalls that we are using. And this 192.168.2.0 is going to be acting as my inside zone, and 23 again is our outside zone. So what we have to look at here is traffic going from inside or inside to outside, or coming from outside to inside. So let me again brief you about the defaults of Palo Alto. It does not allow any communication by default from inside to outside, whether it is ICMP or any other protocol. And also it does not allow any communication to its interfaces, as in this PC, if it wants to ping to this particular interface of the firewall, we cannot do it by default. Similarly here, so we will look at these things in detail when we log into it. So let's log in. I have already started it to give it a boot time while I explain this. I'm sure this has been up. This is our router. Let me configure it with the expected IP address, which is going to be 23.002 on 0/1 with a mask of 24. I do a no shut. I also give a default route IP route 192.168.2.1, which is the IP address for my test PC and the management PC in the inside zone. And the next stop is to be 23.003 as per the diagram, which is our outside interface of Palo Alto. All right, that's all on the router. Let's save the configuration and go to the Palo Alto. So here is the CLI login. By default, the management interface that you get is 192.168.1.1, but our topology does not want this particular IP address, so I'm going to change it. Log into it by admin, which is default, and I go to the configure mode of it. There is no privilege mode as such, as we had seen in Cisco. This itself is the configuration mode, and we do changes in the management IP address by the command set a device config system IP address, and IP address, let's give it 10.001, and the net mask would be 24. And there is one more thing that we need to keep in mind here. By default, the management interface of the Palo Alto is configured to receive IP addresses from DHCP. So we need to change that to static first. So set device config system type static, and I'll give that command again. And in Palo Alto, it's not like Cisco that you have given a command and it immediately comes to effect. And no, until and unless you do not do a commit, the changes do not come to effect. So I do a commit here and I go to my management PC and access 10.0.0.1, which is the management interface of Palo Alto as per our topology. Let's log into it, which is admin and admin, the default credentials. The firewall says you might want to change these. I say we'll do it later on. Okay, let me close this welcome message. As you can see, we're doing the almost latest PanOS 8. So you can see the management IP address to be 10.1 and a lot of management information. Let's go to network and configure our interfaces. So before we configure interfaces, we will have to configure zones. So let's go to zones in network. There is an option to add a new zone. So I'm going to name this zone as inside zone. This is going to be a layer 3 zone. And I'm going to add an interface. So right now you see that I do not see any physical interface to it because the physical interfaces are not configured yet. So I am not going to add any interfaces as of now. And I'm going to add the IP address which belongs to this particular zone. So I add 192.168.2.0/24. So I've added an entire range of IP addresses which belong to inside zone. And I do a OK. I add another zone. Okay, let's add the zone in a different way now. I go to interfaces, Ethernet 1/1 as per topology, which is going to be our outside interface. Interface type is going to be a layer 3 interface. It is going to have virtual router, which is the default virtual router. Security zone is not going to be inside. 1/1 is in outside, so I'm going to create a new zone. We can create new zones from here as well. So I click on it, outside, and I add a list here, which is 23.0.0.0/24. So these are the IP addresses which are going to be part of our outside zone. So 1/1 is part of outside zone. I go to IP version 4 settings. I give an IP address to it. So I can write the IP address here as well, or we can create an address object. So it is always recommended to create an address object so that you can use that object again and again wherever and whenever it is required. So the name of the object could be anything, but for good naming convention, let's name it as the IP address of the interface. You cannot give slash and all in the name, so that's all for the name. And here is the actual IP address that you will give. .3/24. So this is 23.003/24 is the object. So that's all for the interface configuration. I'm gonna say OK, and here is it. 1/1 is a layer 3 interface having an IP address of 23.3 being part of default virtual router, and it is part of outside zone. But as you can see, the interface is showing down. It's not green yet. So let me configure 1/2 as well, and then we'll turn them up. Same, a layer 3 interface, part of virtual router. The concept of virtual router is beyond the limits of this particular video, guys. Hence, I'm not explaining it, but let's choose the default for now. And 1/2 is part of inside zone. So I'm going to select inside. IP is going to be, again, I'll create an object for it. 192.168.2.1 and the actual IP address with the mask. I say OK. And as I said, commit is required. So that's how you do it from a GUI. I'll wait for the commit to happen. Right, as you can see, there are no errors or warnings as such shown, and it's a successful commit. And let's go ahead. So as of now, we see the link states are up, and 1/1 is having the respective IP addresses, and also 1/2. Let's try and ping and see what is the default behavior from Palo Alto. I'll go to the command prompt and I'll ping 23.0.0.2, which is the outside. So as you can see, we are not able to ping. Firewall by default is not allowing this to happen. And just to be very sure, we can also have a look at the gateways. So 2.1 is the IP address and the gateway is 2.254. Now let's look at the policies. So as you can see, we have two default policies built in Palo Alto. One is intra-zone, which is within a particular zone. If I have got two interfaces in the same zone, this policy would be applied to them. In our case, it is inter-zone default, which is getting in picture because we have two interfaces in a different zone. And the action here is deny. The default action for any traffic is deny. So I'm going to change it, but as you see, this policy opens up in a read-only mode. I go to action and I'm not able to change any action. So what I will have to do is I will have to override the system. There is an option, you click on it, you override, and now you can change. So you change it to allow. Click OK, and don't forget to commit. A successful commit, and now let's check if we can ping. And we are still not able to ping. Let me check. The PC seem to have multiple gateways. Let me check if it is taking the correct route or not. So route parent is the command to check for the gateways or the routing table on a PC. So I do have a default route which points to 2.254, and I also have a default route which is pointed towards 0.1. All right, metric for this is 10 and metric for this is 11. So I'm gonna make sure that this goes through the correct interface. All right, we're still not able to ping. That's strange. Let's troubleshoot further. And let's make sure our IP addresses and interfaces are correctly configured. And there you go. Ethernet 1/2 is not supposed to have 2.1. It is supposed to have 2.254 as its IP address. I'm gonna change this. Let's create a new one. 192.168.2.254 slash 24. And don't forget to commit. And I would also double check the next hop here. Okay, it is 254. A successful commit. There it is. And let's try again. All right, there you go. We do have successful pings going around. But there is a strange thing here. You cannot ping 192.168.2.254. Although the traffic is going through the firewall, but the traffic going to the firewall is getting dropped. So what we can do here is, although this is not really required, but for troubleshooting purposes, what you can do is you can create management profile. An interface management profile can be created. I click on add and I allow ping, and there are many other services that can be allowed for a particular interface to cater. And this is the permitted IP addresses. If you don't enter anything, it is for everybody. So let me call this policy to the interfaces. I go to interface 1/1 in the advanced. Here it is, the management profile. If I select a ping, click OK, and if I select the same on this, and not forgetting to commit, and doing a check now. All right, successful commit comes up, and now I'm able to ping the interfaces. So that's how it is, guys. So that's about the Palo Alto, which did not allow you to ping its interface, but it did allow the traffic to pass through the default policy after making some changes to it. And after making the interface profile, we could do a ping to that particular interface on which the policy was implemented. It's a zone-based firewall, creating zones. And now if you see In the zone, you will have interfaces already added to them. Initially, we do not add interfaces to zones. So adding zone to interface or calling zones on interfaces while configuring interface, it's all the same. So that's about Palo Alto's default behavior, guys. That's all for this video. Let's jump to our next firewall.